Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses Live. It's Wednesday, the 11th of November. It's Armistice Day, and this is episode number 86. It's a brightening morning here in London. We've actually had some nice weather for a few days. So what have we got for you today? Well, I'm going to look at the riding schools situation yet again. I'll try to get through that reasonably quickly. Bikers with cancelled tests are not going to be automatically rescheduled. That came out during my investigations the other day. Longer and heavier lorries could be allowed on Britain's roads. Stretch of the A12 is to be resurfaced for the first time since the 1960s. An electric hybrid Ducati is not quite what I'd envisaged. And Sena and Interphone are to make their Bluetooth headsets compatible. So sit yourself down, grab yourself your brew and enjoy the next 25 minutes or so of Elevenses. Don't forget, if you've got a question or a comment or some thing that you want to say, do follow that up. I will get back to you at the end of the show. John Clint Sinclair has said, pay some respect. It's Remembrance Day. I believe I just did that, actually, John. I did mention it, but thanks for reminding us all. Okay, so right on with the show. Let's just turn that banner off. Right, so basically what's going on with rider training? Well, the problem is that the can I, can't I debate grinds on pretty much ad infinitum. At least one CAM rider branch has actually reopened for business. Now, let's just remind you of the situation during the last lockdown. CBT and test training for key workers was allowed, so long as the training schools took necessary safeguards, risk assessments, ensured basically that social distancing went on whilst the riders weren't on the bike. But for some reason, this time round, that approach has been rejected. And the initial guidance that came from the DVSA was that car and bike schools must not run training. Now, that injunction was rapidly questioned by the Driving Instructors Association, DIA, who pointed out that the government had actually said no such thing. And the DVSA statement was quickly amended to say that lessons should not take place and that trainers were advised against critical worker lessons. Now, I know that CAM Riders boss Bernard Adams sent the DVSA a lawyer's letter, and in response, he received a reply to say that although training should not take place, his school would need to decide whether to follow the guidance, and it confirmed that he would they will not close his business or remove instructor certificates should you continue training. Now, not surprisingly, the situation that arose almost immediately was that other schools wanted to know whether that was for CAM rider only, was it a one-off in other words, or did it apply to anybody who was involved in rider training? So were every other school allowed to train or not? So what's happened, of course, is that many schools have written, emailed, phoned the DVSA asking for clarifications of what this should not statement means. And where responses have been received, and I will stress it's by no means all these inquiries which have been answered, the should not advised against statement has simply been repeated, and there's been no attempt to clarify it any further. Other schools, presumably those lacking the resources to call in a legal eagle, have written to ministers, to MPs, to health and safety executive, and to various police forces. And basically what they've got is a circular response which simply refers back to the original DVSA statement saying that training should not take place. So no clarification, no basis for that guidance, and certainly no explanation of its whether it has legal force. One fear that came out was that trainers wondered if that they went against the DSA's guidance, they would find their insurance invalidated. Now, not surprisingly, some trainers got onto their insurers. Lexham do a lot of insurance work for motorcycle training schools, and they've confirmed that all insurance held with them. Lexham, I stress this is just one insurance company, but they have confirmed that public liability, road risks, professional indemnity, all remain valid regardless of what the DVSAs are saying about should not train. The real question I see here is that it's whether or not the DVSA are in a position of having legal authority to give an order when the broader regulations allow people to go to work if you can't work from home. It's not a question of looking for loopholes to carry on working when others have shut down. It's basically the legality of the issue. Yesterday, Tuesday, that is, the National Association or Strategic Partnership, of which the DIA is a member, they issued a long update on the lockdown as it involves rider and driver trainings in all aspects, learner car drivers, learner motorcycle riders, PSV, HGV, basically everything. And they posed the question to the DVSA. They asked them directly, will I be breaking the law if I carry on training my pupils? What enforcement will there be? And the DVSA essentially dodged the question. Their answer says, and I'll read this out, enforcement of COVID rules is a police matter. The position remains, if an ADI or a motorcycle instructor is convicted of an offence, the ADI or CBT registrar will take all the circumstances into consideration when deciding whether or not they are a fit and proper person to remain on the register of instructors. So basically, it's a masterpiece, isn't it? It completely fails to answer the legality question, and it shuffles the responsibility off onto the police to decide whether a breach has taken place, but it continues to wave the big threatening stick over instructors who carry on working. Now, predictably, some training school owners have decided to shut down, and a few have gone as far as to suggest that other trainers are just picking holes in the directive, or they're looking to, sort of make money where other people aren't. But, quite honestly, there are many small training schools who are struggling financially, particularly new owner trainers who don't seem to be eligible for any financial assistance. Now, interestingly, I went to have a look to see about horse riding, and it turns out you can still get a lesson on your horse, provided your riding coach has taken appropriate steps, which includes the disinfecting of shared clothing, tackle equipment, that kind of thing, social distancing of 2 meters, and so on. So basically the same steps that rider trainers will have taken. And what they say over on the horse riding websites is that coaching can take place outdoors with one person from outside your household or your bubble, so long as you limit the number of journeys you need to take and you only undertake essential travel. There is a proviso, though, and that seems to be that the coaching must be for educational purposes, in other words, leading to a formal qualification. Now, given that the CBT and the driving test are actually formal qualifications, I'm struggling to see why CBT isn't allowed under the same rules, even if tests are cancelled. So, it really seems like nitpicking and navel gazing to some people, I'm sure. But one argument is tests can be rescheduled. But yes, they can, but it's causing long delays and it's causing expense to learners and training schools. And the genuine difficulty is arising for those people who've got tests booked for the day or so after lockdown is released. How are you going to get somebody up to test standard in a couple of days? It's easy to say, well, cancel the test and reschedule it. But the delays in getting new tests has been considerable, and some of these people have been put back twice now. There's also a slightly different problem for motorcycle trainers, in as much as they are the source of a CBT certificate, which obviously allows drivers, or riders, I should say, to use the roads on L plates. And the CBT certificate, unlike a car license or a bike license, has a limited life, and a significant number of CBTs will expire during this month of lockdown. And that's a month which may well be extended, of course. And that leaves those riders having to make a decision about whether to carry on riding minus a CBT, breaking the law themselves, or to hang up their riding boots for the time being. Now, at this time, the lockdown is really aimed at preventing social contact at home and in environments like pubs and restaurants. The intent was always to allow people to remain at work or at college if they need to go there. Motorcycling is a valid form of transport to get to both of those places, particularly when people want to avoid public transport. So I'm really struggling with the rationale here. Right, sorry to bang on about that, and I've got one more thing to say about rider training before I move on, and that's to make a slight correction on test cancellations. I was under the impression that all tests would be automatically rescheduled by the DVSA, but a series of tweets that they put out a couple of days ago tells me that for some reason that's only for car tests, whether they've been booked by the candidate themselves or by the driving instructor. And it also applies to the small number of bike tests that have been booked directly by the candidate. But the vast majority of motorcycle tests are booked through an ATB, and for some reason it turns out that these are all being cancelled and that the ATB is being automatically refunded, but the ATB then needs to go online and rebook a new time and a new date for those tests. So they're not getting automatic priority for cancelled tests. It basically looks like you're going to go to the back of the queue. And I'm hearing that tests that have been cancelled for November are actually likely to happen no sooner than March next year. So those are the first available dates, it seems, in some places. So it's pretty tough if you were test ready. Social media has got its place, but this scattergunning of vital bits of information over various media sources is pretty daft. I didn't see it on either the DVSA's original mail that went out to bike schools or on the .gov UK page. All right, okay, enough about rider training for the time being. What else? Well, longer and heavier lorries could be allowed on the roads. The Department of Transport have launched a consultation on proposals to gain permission for heavier lorries. Now, what this would mean is that as they could carry more goods, the argument is they could cut down the number of journeys needed on the network, and that would supposedly improve efficiency and cut emissions. Now, right now, the maximum weight allowed on the roads is 44 tonnes. You may remember that was raised from 38 some years ago. New plans would see lorries go up to 48 tonnes. And the trailer lengths would also be extended by 2 meters. And the original consultation document says that some organizations have identified that allowing 6-axle articulated lorries to be operated at 48 tons during domestic intermodal journeys would improve efficiency and support rail freight. And what they say is it could be permitted for repetitive container loads that travel along a set route. And basically, yes, they're saying this would reduce the number of lorry movements to service each train for operations that are liable to happen frequently, etc., etc. And they argue that it's a rise in population growth and particularly demand for online shopping, which has led to significant increases in lorry traffic. I'm slightly confused by how online shopping would lead to an increase in lorry traffic, because presumably we're not buying any more than we were previously. It's simply going to different places. Anyway, the DFT have said that the longer trailers would allow 2 extra rows of pallets or 3 rows of supermarket goods cages per journey. But, you know, is this actually a great idea? Now, one of the things that doesn't get mentioned, of course, in this consultation is any kind of discussion about the potential damage that would cause to road surfaces. Heavily laden lorries do cause ruts to form where those wheels run over the same route over and over again. You've only got to drive up the inside lane of most motorways to discover that there are little channels where the lorry wheels go. Now, there's no information directly there on how those regulations might affect axle loadings, which is presumably what does the damage. And quite frankly, with road repairs way behind schedule, my fear is that heavy lorries simply would make things worse. And that leaves me rather neatly into my next piece as well. A stretch of the A12 that was built in the 1960s is set to be resurfaced for the first time as part of a £4 million Highways England scheme. And this stretch of the A12 was originally built in concrete and has survived nearly over 50 years, which is pretty damned impressive. So the repairs will basically fix potholes, replace curbs, clear drains, install road studs and markings to replace those that are there at the moment. And it's due to begin on Friday on the zone between junction 22 and 24, which is Coleman's and the Kelvedon bypass. Carl Brooks, who's the program delivery manager for Highways England, said up to 80,000 drivers use this stretch of the A12 every day for work, journeys and home deliveries, visits to friends and family, holidays and movement of goods and surfaces. And despite the serving us well, the surface is coming to the end of its life and needs an upgrade. And they aim to make the A12 smoother and safer and fit for the future. So they'll be working through the weekends rather than weekdays, and that will help see the number of road closures reduced. The road closure will run for 7 consecutive weekends, and it will be closed completely in both directions with directions signposted. So, okay, thanks to Malk for that particular update. Okay, now, just a reminder, while it's still all up in the air about whether or not I can run my socially distanced courses, I can at least continue with my online training. You can learn better biking skills from the comfort of your own home. So I'll just remind you, you can help me out while I'm locked down. For the price of a coffee, you can get the growing back catalogue of articles on coffee.com/survival skills. 4 new support articles went up there just yesterday, and there are a new range of downloadable and inexpensive mini ebooks as well. So it's way over 250 pieces for you to read there, all on different aspects of riding. If you want something more one-to-one, you can also have a think about my online coaching sessions, which basically offer the same client-based training that Survival Skills is well known for, but they're set up for distance learning. And I just happen to be a qualified e-tutor. So you tell me what you want and I'll set the session up for you. And they can run pretty much any time, weekdays and weekends, and day or evening to suit you. Educational, convenient, and the good news is they're even warm at this time of year, which is a big bonus. Right, okay, so this particular photo popped into my news feed just this morning, just a few hours before I actually went online, actually after I'd set the show up. It's oddly enough, I'd not seen it here, even though it's in a magazine and it's produced by Highways England. I actually got the link to it from friends out in New Zealand, contacts from my Shiny Side Up work out there. It's actually quite a good way of making a very serious point, is that, bolt-on bits for bikes are might be expensive, but they're relatively easy to fit. Although just having fitted a new shock absorber, I might dispute that, but that's another story. But basically, rebuilding bits of the human body actually are not nearly so easy. And that there is the sort of thing that might be holding your spine together after a bad crash. So, okay. Right, so back on with other information. One of my regular frustrations when out training is that trainees will turn up with their own Bluetooth radios in their helmets, and then they'll ask me if I can pair them, my radio with theirs. And one or two do get a little bit frustrated when I say no, it can't be done. I honestly have tried. I've tried pairing my radios with 4 other brands, and they don't work. And this lack of compatibility is a real contrast. The old PMR radios, which I used and many training schools still do use, are cross-compatible in many cases. And that's because an official standard was laid down to which the radio has to conform, and that tells you the power output of the radio, but it also covers the frequencies at which they operate. Some manufacturers have tried to lock down their radios by using particular frequencies, which are a little bit more difficult to locate, but any of these radios can be put back to the standard channels, and then they can talk to each other. But up till now, Bluetooth have not been able to chat amongst themselves, with a couple of exceptions. But here's some good news. Sena and Interphone devices will be compatible from 2021. Now, obviously, this won't affect your old kit. It will only be for new devices. But Sena Technologies and Interphone have announced what they are calling a strategic alliance, so that from next year on, Sena's proprietary communication technology will actually work along with the new Interphone product line. There's probably a financial reason for this. Both manufacturers have been able to charge what are really fairly astonishing amounts of cash for what is effectively a few pounds worth of electronic circuitry. But what's happened, as in so many areas, they've now been undercut by the Chinese companies manufacturing similar items, and not just by a couple of pounds either. I can buy a pair of Bluetooth units for £60. They function equally as well as the shorter range pair of Cardo intercoms that I used for a year or two. Those Cardos set me back £400 about 5 or 6 years ago. So you can see the difference in price. There is a really significant difference. So the alliance is probably designed to encourage riders to buy Sena and Interphone, knowing that they will work with each other. So I doubt very much that it's an attempt to cut development or manufacturing costs. Okay. Don't forget, you're watching Elevenses live with Kevin Williams here of Survival Skills, and you can tune in for the show at 11 BST most weeks on Wednesdays and Sundays. And if you missed the show, you can catch up here on Facebook, or you can head over to my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK, and you can follow it over there. So set yourself a reminder so that you don't forget to look in. Right, okay. Moving on quickly, one other story. You may remember that I mentioned a sort of puzzle that had been going through my head about why there aren't any hybrid motorcycles. Now, electric bikes right now weigh no more than a conventional petrol-engined bike. In fact, they're actually, in some cases, a little bit lighter. So the opportunity to build a hybrid bike with an internal combustion engine capable of dealing with longer trips, but with a short-range electric motor for city centre use seems really appealing. Now, I've wondered why something like the 300, 400cc twins, sort of the Yamaha R3 kind of bike, that would give the motorcycle a reasonable top speed. But if you added tacked on an electric motor and a short-range battery, something that could take it just 10 or 12 miles, you'd have a perfect bike for dealing with the petrol engine exclusion zones, which are now appearing in London, for example. So I read about a new hybrid conversion kit that appeared at a bike show, and I got moderately excited. And then my chin hit the floor. The kit was for Ducati's V12 Panigale 1299. Now, although that bike's now discontinued, it was hardly short of power, but presumably the 196 horsepower it made wasn't enough. In electric-only mode, the kit really doesn't do anything very useful. It allegedly goes 30 to 40 minutes at speeds of up to 40 miles per hour. Regenerative braking would eke out the distance. Or you can run it in a recharge mode where the batteries are recharged by driving it on the conventional engine. But the real reason of putting the kit on the bike is to run both motors together. The electric motor adds 99 horsepower, but doubles torque to 221 foot-pounds, which really gives you a bit of a clue as to the reason behind that project. What's the cost in terms of weight on the bike? 26 kilos. The batteries are also under the seat hump, which has to be raised 20 millimeters, and the motor sits down somewhere on the chassis. So realistically, that's not what I would call a genuine hybrid. Anyway, that's it for today. Do tune in again next Sunday for more topical news, controversial views, and I'll be offering you a better biking kit too. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and we'll